FPL Game Week 37, my first transfer plans. With just 2 weeks left of the season, coming off probably a game week I will never forget with a -8 and playing my bench boost as well. It has been a roller coaster and it is time to restore, hopefully, a bit of calm and a bit of normality with my team. With just 2 weeks left to go, we'll take a look at how we're lining up, my plans, potential targets with 2 weeks left. We'll answer some of your questions, talk about captaincy in Game Week 37. What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here as well. And normally we leave talking about the previous game week until we get to the team selection video on Thursday. But I think it's fair to say I don't think I can really do that. So it was a game week I will never forget. It was a roller coaster. It's ended up being not nearly as bad as it could have been at times during the weekend. It could have been much better. But yeah, let's talk through it. If you are completely unaware at what's happened with my team over the past 48 hours, let's go through it. Going into the deadline, I planned on buying Wissa into my team for either Mateta or for Marmoush, and we heard going into the deadline that Marmoush surprisingly was not starting for Manchester City, so I took him out for Wissa. But then going in as the deadline crept closer, about 3 minutes before the deadline, I didn't feel comfortable at all going into the final 3 weeks of the season with no Manchester City attack, given I just sold Marmoush. I knew how highly owned he still was. I knew how highly owned De Bruyne was, and I knew people were starting to buy back Erling Haaland. So I clicked the button on a -8. That -8 was selling Marmoush, of course, selling Mateta, and selling Morgan Rogers. 3 players who only net, I think, a total of 9 points. You think with a -8, things could go well. Unfortunately not. Wissa with a 1-pointer, Evan Nilsson with 2, and Kevin De Bruyne with 3 combined. I'm 11 points down on the -8. To be honest, it could have been much worse going into Sunday with the likes of Mateta still to play, not coming away with very much. But I was bailed out. I was bailed out by a very good bench boost, or a very lucky bench boost. My starting 11 was horrific. I think I scored a total of 34 points in my starting 11, and on my bench, I scored 30 points. Areola 8, Sarr 6, Munoz 11, Konza 5. Now, in theory, if you want to add up my lowest scoring players, I should have, in theory, benched double Forest defence. But at home to Leicester, I was never going to play Munoz over them. And that was part of the reason that I wanted to play the bench boost, is because I quite fancied Munoz this week, but I didn't see any of my starting defenders that I could realistically go and bench. So I got 64 overall with a -8, so 56 net. It was a red arrow from about 6k down, from about 7k down to just inside the top 8k. I'm now 7 points inside the top 10k with 2 weeks left. I think it's fair to say if I get 2 red arrows, I won't make it. If I get 2 green arrows, I will. If I get 1 green arrow, I probably should. So I need 1 green arrow over the final 2 game weeks of the season to get it. At points, going into, I think, Saturday evening, I was outside the top 10k. It was a horrific start with the -8, the De Bruyne blank, and of course, Rogers getting a return. And we'll talk about Morgan Rogers in a moment. He might be one ending up back in my team this week. But yeah, crazy week. A week I will never forget. It does reinforce the sometimes boring is best mantra that I often play with, and I should have played with again this week. And making transfers right before the deadline that you're unsure of tend to not be worth it. And a -8 with 3 weeks left of the season probably definitely isn't worth it. But that's where we're at regardless. It is okay. 2 weeks left. It could have been a hell of a lot worse. And I have had an emotional roller coaster over the weekend because, of course, also, I'm a Chelsea fan and we are chasing Champions League football. Aston Villa unfortunately won. Then Chelsea dropped points and Jackson got himself sent off. What a ridiculous decision that was from him. Then, of course, Nottingham Forest went and dropped points again later. So all is not lost. And, of course, Manchester City also dropped points. So from a footballing perspective this weekend, I have been up and down and up and down. But anyway, let's go and have a look at game week 37. My team is lining up as it does on screen now. Raya in goal. Gvardiol, Munoz, and Konza all at home. I am benching my Nottingham Forest defenders, and I probably will not play them again this season. They are so frustrating. I own them for this game, in theory for the West Ham game as well, but I don't plan on playing them there. In theory, I could play one of them over Konza, but Villa feel really focused and really switched on at the moment, and Nottingham Forest feel the complete opposite and are absolutely falling apart. And the fact that the Forest owner went on the pitch at full time to have a go at the manager in front of the cameras just blows my mind. So we're going with Konza at the moment over the Forest defenders, and I am going with Munoz. Yes, they play the FA Cup final on a Saturday, and then they play Tuesday. But I think Munoz has only missed one Premier League game this season for Crystal Palace, and it is their final home game. So I am hopeful that he does start that match. And I think he's just so superior to the Forest defenders that I am going to just chance Munoz starting. And then, of course, we're going Gavardio, who's been an absolute hero, but basically everyone owns him, so he doesn't do anything for my rank. My midfield actually looks quite good. I'm pretty happy with a Salah and Burmo, Saka, De Bruyne midfield for the final few weeks. I would say the ones that I may be missing are Morgan Rogers and Jared Bowen, both who got returns this week. And we'll talk about them. And I wish going into game week 38 that I could potentially find a route to go and buy a Jared Bowen away at Ipswich. I do think that he is a great pick for the final couple of games, but I don't think I really have a route to do it. So he's probably one that I'm going to have to let go. And at the moment, we're starting Sarr and we're benching Evan Nilsson away at Manchester City. Again, it feels a little bit like Munoz that I don't think Sarr is a bad pick, but I do think there will be some Crystal Palace rotation on that Tuesday game. I don't think it will be wholesale changes. I think some of the first team will retain their place. So part of me does wonder about just sticking with and actually rolling my transfer this week. Salah and Burmo, Saka, De Bruyne, Wissa up front at home to Fulham, and then it is Isak away at Arsenal. However, I actually don't mind Isak this week. It looks like Arsenal are going to be without Marino, who's now suspended, and likely to be without Declan Rice as well, which means their midfield, depending on if Jorginho is back or not, could look a little bit weak. And I know Newcastle are fighting everything to get that Champions League spot. So this game will come with a lot of focus for Newcastle. We are looking at potential replacement for Isak. I know a lot of people are looking at Watkins. I just don't think it's a priority transfer by any means. His ownership will drop and drop, but with Everton at home on the final day, again, I don't think it's a necessity to go and sell him. So my team doesn't look bad on paper. I'm actually quite happy with it. And actually part of the reason with the transfers that I did was it does set me up quite well for game week 38, right? Because I've got Salah and Burmo, Saka, De Bruyne, pretty nice midfield three. Wissa away at Wolves on the final day, Isak at home to Everton, and Evan Nilsson, of course, at home to Leicester on the final day. So my front seven for the final day doesn't look too bad. It's maybe just that final attacker this week of Isak, Sarr, and Evan Nilsson that doesn't feel quite as strong. Defensively, I think in game week 38, I'll probably end up making a defensive transfer, but I'm not sure that I need it this week, right? I think going into game week 38, buying a Kirkes up against Leicester or buying another Arsenal defender, in theory, looking at someone like a Livramento at home to Everton as well, are all defenders that I will look at and probably want to buy going into game week 38 because Konza is away at Manchester United, but they could have a lot to play for, so I don't mind that. Munoz is away at Liverpool, not great. Gavardio, I'll of course play. And then we have double Forest playing against Chelsea as well. So I probably will need a defender for the final day. It might not be a complete priority depending on how this week goes. But this week, I think I'm probably either rolling or focusing on that 8th attacker. So having a chat about some of those final attackers that I could look at. Of course, if I was to sell Isak, it would be to Watkins. He plays Spurs at home. Now, what I would say is Spurs and Ange Postecoglou have said basically that they didn't plan on focusing on this Crystal Palace game at all. And we saw that with the lineup, right? Even they changed their goalkeeper. But that Aston Villa game for them is probably their last proper preparation for the Europa League final. Now that it's been brought forward to the Friday, that's still a pretty good gap until the game and the final on the Wednesday the following week. So I'm not ruling out that Spurs play a pretty full-strength lineup. And although I like Watkins as an option, is it where I want to use one of my final two transfers for Isak, given the fixture that Isak's got in game week 38 as well? I'm not sure it is. I've got my eye on it. My other thing is potentially selling Sarr. And it sounds crazy, but I might end up back at Morgan Rogers. And I should have sold Sarr this week. I just thought Sarr was a better pick this week than Rogers was. They've ended up coming, I think, away with exactly the same points. So I should have sold Sarr this week instead and gone with Morgan Rogers and held him for the final 2 weeks. But you live and you learn. I've learned a lot from my transfers this week, I think it's fair to say. So if I was to sell Sarr, in theory, I've got 0.9 million in the bank. I do want to leave a little bit in the bank going into game week 38. So I have about 6 million to spend. There are a few options that I could look at. Marcus Asensio with Jacob Ramsey suspended. His minutes should definitely go up and is potentially on penalties as well. Or I just go and buy Morgan Rogers. Or I look to go with a bit of a punt on someone like a Kevin Schade. I could have a look at, of course. He scored and has Fulham at home this week, but then I would have a triple up on the Brentford attack, which I'm not sure feels like the most sensible answer. I could, of course, then go and have a look at Nottingham Forest away at West Ham and buy someone like an Alanga as well, who is back in the returns over the past few weeks. So looking at my team, I would say I'm likely to use my transfer this week. If for some reason we got to the deadline and we thought Sarr would start at home to Wolves and it looked very likely, then maybe I would do it. I could also just start Evan Nilsson away at Manchester City, but with 2 weeks left of the season, I'm not sure that's definitely worthwhile. And I know that someone like a Watkins and a Rodgers are going to be very highly owned going into this week. And going into this week with no Villa attack doesn't feel like the most sensible thing to do. So I've got my eye on both Watkins and Rodgers. I would say that's the most likely scenario that I end up buying one of those two with my transfer this week. I know I shouldn't have sold Sarr this week, but yeah, that's where we're at. So that's probably the plan with my team. Let's have a look at a few other things with your questions as well. So let's go and answer a few of the key Game Week 37 questions. The first one, and actually probably the biggest one, is let's start looking at some differentials. The man I've got in the graphic is Jamie Vardy at home to Ipswich. He is, of course, one Premier League goal away from 150 and one goal away from 200 with Leicester. And they go away to Bournemouth on the final day. So you've got to say he has absolutely got to be gunning for it at home to Ipswich, which is a very decent fixture. So if you're looking for a cheap forward for a 1-week punt, for example, you've got someone you don't really want this week, you've got a Mateta and you don't need them in game week 38, I really would be looking at Jamie Vardy as a nice differential. A few others to list. We've got Cole Palmer in there. We've got Matheus Cunha. Watkins at the moment with a bit of a star because he's a differential at the moment. I don't know how much of a differential he will be once the deadline does roll around, though. We've got Kevin Schade. You've got a couple of Everton players with their fixture at home to Southampton this week in Decore and Beto. You've got Asensio. We've mentioned going with someone else from Aston Villa other than Watkins. Neto, Saka, again, not that highly owned and had a big chance early on against Liverpool. I would have been on a green arrow if he'd have scored that chance. Aït-Nouri in defence if you want one, although it doesn't feel like defensive transfers are really the priority. You've got Kudos, Gibbs-White, Alanga in there as well. So quite a few players. And if you look at the fixture ticker, again, Ipswich are right up at the top. You're probably not looking to buy them over the next couple of weeks. Arsenal at home to Newcastle. If you wanted to go and buy Saka, you could. Think he's pretty good for the final two, of course, their final home game, and then Southampton on the final day. Everton, it's fine if you can buy this week, but it's not great with Newcastle on the final day. Villa feel pretty good that you could play at home to Spurs and then away at Manchester United if you needed to. Of course, the two clubs in the Europa League final, they play either side of that final. Bournemouth, although it's not great this week, in theory, you could buy and then bench in game week 37 and play in game week 38. Forest look like they're falling off. Leicester and Vardy look pretty good this week. Outside of that, I really probably wouldn't look at them. West Ham, again, if you want Jared Bowen, he doesn't feel like much of a differential anymore. Then you've got Wolves, Brentford, and in theory, Liverpool as well. The thing is with the Liverpool and City assets, although their fixtures are not bad, the ones you want and the ones that are good differentials are probably not, well, the ones you want to buy are probably not good differentials. It's pretty difficult to see which of that Liverpool front three will start both of them. Defensively, we're seeing rotation as well. Don't love the Liverpool fixtures for a clean sheet. Manchester City, it's pretty difficult to predict starts now, particularly with their game coming after the FA Cup final. So looking at the ones at the top, we've spoken about them. Next question is what to do with Crystal Palace. Also, I suppose focusing a little bit on Manchester City because they all play Saturday in the Cup final and then Tuesday in the Premier League. What I would say, particularly with Manchester City dropping points, is they can't afford to drop any more points in the race for Champions League. If they didn't beat Bournemouth, things would look like a real mess for them. So I do expect a pretty full-strength Manchester City lineup on Tuesday. And I know people on my deadline stream massively disagreed with me on this, but I genuinely think Manchester City are more focused on that Bournemouth at home game. Them getting Champions League football is more important than them winning the FA Cup. If Manchester City are in the Europa League next year and they win the FA Cup, or you'd give them Champions League football and no FA Cup, I'm almost sure that every City fan would take the Champions League football over winning this FA Cup. Now, it might be better for this season alone, but for the long term of the club, I do think that City will put out a full-strength team at home to Bournemouth. Bournemouth are no team that you just want to play a rotated team against. Manchester City have already learned that lesson once this season. So if you've got City players, if you've got De Bruyne, I would be looking to play him. Marmoush is difficult because he didn't start this. They definitely didn't look any better with Erling Haaland back in the team though. So you could chance it. Like, would I sell him for a hit? I only expect Marmoush to probably play one of the last two, so you could look to move him on. Really, the focus though is on Crystal Palace. I do think we will see some rotation. I do think some of them will play both games though. It is their final home game. And I do think that they will not just fully rotate. And a lot of these players will get some minutes. I do probably expect Munoz to start. And I do expect probably one of Mateta, Sarr, and Eze to start. Mateta feels like the biggest risk, given that he's not even playing enough minutes at the moment to warrant him staying in our teams regardless. He didn't even make the 60th minute today. So With that being said, if you've got Eze and Sarr, I probably would look to bench or probably sell because they've got Liverpool on the final day. Mateta, I would definitely sell. And then if you've got Munoz, I would probably play him. And then we're looking at captaincies. For me, Watkins, Palmer, Salah feel like the top three this week. And I know what you'll say about Palmer, but I still think, even with Jackson out, that he is the main creative force and he is playing a Manchester United team who have their focus definitely on other things. Salah is really weird at the moment. He feels very much like he wants assists. If you watch the games, it's like he's trying to get assists to get the assist record rather than actually scoring goals. Brighton is not a bad fixture, and I do think Liverpool will probably win it, but it does put me off a little bit. So Watkins is a great differential. He's not going to be that highly owned this week, and I do think a lot of people will default to Mo Salah with that Brighton fixture. So just going back to my team and rounding everything up, I think it really depends on captaincy for me. If I think Ollie Watkins is head and shoulders the best captain this week, then something like Isak to Watkins is definitely something I would consider in order to put the captaincy armband on him. But if I'm happy with the captaincy on Mo Salah, then I think Sarr to Rodgers is then probably the most likely transfer. I think I'm very likely to buy an Aston Villa player. In theory, I could roll the transfer this week, just play Sarr, hope he starts, but it doesn't feel great. I am relying on someone like a Mo Salah. I am relying on a differential like Bukayo Saka doing well, and Burmo is also a decent captain, right? Fulham have just shipped goals to Everton, and that's not completely out of the question that he could end up with the captaincy armband. So I've got a few things to think about. Let's look until we get later on in the week. Let's hear what Ange Postecoglou's got to say and how much he might rotate that Spurs side, or actually how much might Aston Villa cruise past them in that fixture on Friday night. That's going to play a big part in what we do. Not too much football during this midweek though, which is quite nice to have a little bit of a breather in the midweek of game week 36 with just 2 weeks to go, 37 and 38. It was what a weekend of football. I need a breather. I need to lie down. Any questions you have, drop them in the comment section down below. 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here and let me know how you've got on this week. Was yours as much of a roller coaster as my week was, or was it more straightforward? And didn't you take a -8? Surely everyone did. Anyway, yeah, thank you for watching. 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll be back again very soon.